Be me, Ryan. 34 now, but this all started a few years back. I guess you could say I was the typical good guy. Stable job in a field that's boring to explain but pays the bills. Always tried to be considerate, do the right thing, you know the drill. Met Virginia in my late 20s. She was smart, funny, ambitious. Had this fire in her I really admired. We clicked instantly. Our first few dates were just hours of talking. It felt like I'd finally found my person. We dated for a couple of years. Everything was great. Moved in together, got a dog, the whole 9 yards. Marriage felt like the natural next step. The wedding was nice, not too big. Both our families got along. We bought a small house in a decent suburb. The first year or two of marriage was pretty much what I expected. We were a team. We'd tackle house projects together, plan vacations, talk about the future. I thought we were building a life. Then things started to shift. Slowly at first, so you barely notice it. Like the tide going out, 1 inch at a time. Virginia started getting really into online articles and social media circles. Not the usual stuff, but very specific ideological content. Suddenly our conversation started to feel like I was in a lecture hall. New words popped up all the time. Emotional labor, toxic masculinity, patriarchal structures. At first, I tried to be supportive. It's important to grow and learn, right? That's what I told myself. I'd listen to her talk for hours about some new theory she read. I'd nod and try to understand. She had this group of friends who were all on the same wavelength. Whenever they got together, it was like an echo chamber of buzzwords and righteous anger. I started to feel like an outsider in my own home. The real change, the one that started this whole mess, was how she began to view our relationship. It became a series of transactions and power dynamics. Intimacy, which used to be something natural and connecting for us, became conditional. It became a tool. It started subtly. I'd come home from a long day, maybe try to give her a real kiss, and she'd offer her cheek. She'd say she was touched out, or didn't have the emotional capacity for physical affection after dealing with a mansplaining colleague at work. Okay, fair enough, everyone has off days. I'd back off. But then it became a pattern. I remember one weekend I spent all of Saturday fixing the leaky faucet under the sink and mowing the lawn. I was proud of myself, felt like I'd been productive. Later that evening I put my arm around her on the couch. She tensed up immediately. She explained that me doing household chores wasn't something to be rewarded for. It was my basic contribution to dismantling the unfair domestic expectations placed on women. She said, my expectation of affection afterwards showed that my motives were transactional. I was just stunned. I just wanted to be close to my wife. It felt like I was constantly being accused of some hidden, sinister motive. Every attempt at affection was put under a microscope and analyzed for problematic undertones. We hadn't been intimate for a few weeks, and I was starting to feel lonely. I tried talking to her about it. Big mistake. That opened the floodgates for a 2-hour lecture. She told me my focus on the physical aspect of our relationship was a classic symptom of male toxicity. She said I was ignoring her need for intellectual and emotional connection. She asked me if I'd even considered the immense amount of emotional labor she performs for our relationship daily. I honestly didn't know what to say. She recommended a few books and a list of articles for me to read. She said I needed to do the work and educate myself before we could even think about being intimate again. And like an idiot, I actually did it. I read the articles. I tried to understand her point of view. I started doing more around the house, trying to anticipate her needs, trying to take on more of this emotional labor. I'd ask her about her day and listen intently, making sure to validate her feelings about every little workplace drama. I'd handle all the bills, all the scheduling, all the boring life admin stuff without complaint. I thought I was being a good husband. I thought I was fixing things. For a little while, it seemed to work. We'd have a good week, a nice conversation, and maybe, just maybe, she would grant me intimacy. But it never felt the same. It didn't feel like two people connecting. It felt like I had just passed an exam and was collecting my grade. The whole process was humiliating. I had to make sure the house was spotless, the laundry was done. I had listened to all her problems, said all the right things, and then, only then, could I even think about initiating anything. And even then, it was a 50-50 shot. The excuses were endless and always cloaked in academic-sounding language. I can't be intimate tonight, Ryan. I feel like you haven't been truly present during our conversations. You're hearing, but not listening. I don't have the bandwidth for that. The current political climate is just too draining, and I can't engage in something so personal when the patriarchy is on my mind. You sighed when I asked you to take out the recycling. That passive aggression creates an unsafe emotional space for me. I felt like I was going crazy. I was walking on eggshells 24/7. The goalposts were always moving. Whatever I did was never enough. There was always a new hoop to jump through, a new standard I failed to meet. The house became a minefield of potential mistakes. I'd feel a knot in my stomach every time I came home from work. What did I do wrong today? What new transgression will I be accused of tonight? My confidence plummeted. I felt like a failure as a man, as a husband. I started to believe what she was saying. Maybe I really was the problem. Maybe I was just another clueless, toxic man who didn't get it. This went on for the better part of a year, a slow, grinding erosion of my self-worth. My friends started noticing I was pulling away. I'd make excuses not to hang out because I was too tired from the constant mental gymnastics at home. Plus, I was embarrassed. How do you explain to your buddies that your wife has you on a sex point system based on your feminist enlightenment? You don't. You just isolate yourself. Then came the breaking point. It wasn't one big fight. It was something quiet. I had been working on a massive project at my job for almost 2 years. It was a high-stress, high-stakes endeavor that involved a lot of late nights and weekends. I'd poured everything I had into it, and it paid off. I got the promotion, a big one, senior position, corner office, a significant pay raise. I was over the moon. It was the biggest professional achievement of my life. I couldn't wait to tell Virginia. I thought, this is it. This is a win for us. I came home that day feeling like I was walking on air. I bought a bottle of the good champagne, the kind we save for special occasions. I picked up takeout from her favorite restaurant. I walked in the door, beaming, and told her the news. She smiled, a small, tight-lipped smile. "That's nice, Ryan," she said. "That's it. That's nice." We sat down for dinner, and I started telling her all about it, how my boss had praised my work, what my new responsibilities would be. She interrupted me halfway through. She wanted to talk about an article she'd read about how corporate structures disproportionately favor men for promotions, and how my success was, statistically speaking, a product of that systemic bias. She said that while she was happy for me on an individual level, it was important to acknowledge the privilege that got me there. The air went out of me so fast, I felt lightheaded. This wasn't our victory. It was my transgression. I just nodded and quietly ate my food. The fancy takeout tasted like ash. The champagne stayed in the fridge. Later that night, we were getting ready for bed. I was still crushed, but a stupid little part of me was still hopeful. Hopeful that maybe, just maybe, she'd see how much this day meant to me and we could connect. Maybe she'd put the politics aside for one night and just be my wife. I sat on the edge of the bed and she came over and sat next to me. I thought for a second she was going to hug me, to comfort me. She put a hand on my shoulder. I turned to her, and I guess the look on my face was a little too hopeful, a little too needy. She sighed, a deep theatrical sigh of exhaustion, and then she said the words that broke something inside me for good. "Ryan, I understand you're feeling powerful with your new promotion, and you want to affirm that male energy, but I am not a prize to be won after a victory. I'm not your trophy. We can revisit the possibility of intimacy when you've had some time to process your success in a less toxically masculine way." I just stared at her. There was no anger, no sadness, just nothing. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. The part of me that was always trying, always hoping, always scrambling for her approval, it just went quiet. It died. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, went to my side of the bed, got under the covers, and turned my back to her. I lay there for hours, staring into the dark. It was the most peaceful I had felt in months, because I finally understood. I was never going to win. The game was rigged. The only way to win was to stop playing. The next morning, my alarm went off at 5 a.m. I never wake up at 5 a.m. Virginia mumbled something in her sleep, but I was already out of bed. I put on some old workout clothes, drank a glass of water, and walked out the door. There was a 24-hour gym about 10 minutes from our house. I'd been paying for a membership for a year, but had probably gone twice. I walked in, and it was mostly empty. Just a few serious-looking guys lifting heavy things. I felt weak and out of place. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw a soft, tired-looking guy with defeated eyes. I hated him. I started with the treadmill, then some weights. I had no idea what I was doing. Everything felt heavy. My muscles burned. It was awful. It was perfect. For an hour, the only voice in my head was the one telling me to push through the pain. There was no analysis, no judgment, no psychobabble. Just cause and effect. Lift weight, feel burn. I came home, showered, and got ready for work. Virginia was in the kitchen, making coffee. She asked where I'd been. I just said, the gym. She raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything else. That day I stopped trying. I stopped initiating conversations about our relationship. I stopped asking her about her day with that desperate, pleading attentiveness. I stopped doing things in the hope of a reward. I did my share of the chores because I lived there, not because I was trying to earn points. I was polite. I was civil. I was a perfect roommate. And I never, ever tried to initiate intimacy again. Not a hug, not a lingering touch, nothing. I built a wall around myself. The gym became my sanctuary. I went every morning before work. The first few weeks were hell. I was sore all the time. But I started to see small changes. A little more definition in my arms. My shirts fitting better. More importantly, I had more energy. The mental fog I'd been living in started to lift. That's where I met Jared. He was one of the serious lifters I saw on my first day. Big guy, probably in his 40s. He saw me struggling with a bench press one morning and came over to give me a spot. Afterward, he showed me the right form, didn't make a big deal out of it. We started nodding to each other, then making small talk. One morning, we were both stretching after a workout. He looked at me and said, "You look a lot better than you did a month ago. You had that 'my life is over' look in your eyes." I gave a weak laugh. Something like that. He just nodded like he knew. Let me guess. Problems at home? Wife treating you like you're a project she needs to fix? It was so specific I was taken aback. Yeah. How'd you know? He smiled a sad, knowing smile. Been there, done that, got the divorce papers to prove it. Welcome to the club, man. The only advice I'll give you is this. Stop trying to make her happy. Start trying to make yourself proud. That conversation stuck with me. Start trying to make yourself proud. I took that to heart. I doubled down on my new project at work. I was focused, creative, and efficient. My boss was impressed. I dug my old guitar out of the closet. I hadn't played in years because Virginia called it a juvenile hobby. I started teaching myself new songs. The feeling of creating something, even if it was just a simple melody, was incredible. I called up some old friends I'd been ghosting. We went out for a beer. It was awkward at first, but then we'd have fell back into our old rhythm. They asked me where I'd been. I just said I'd been going through some stuff, but was feeling better now. It felt so good to just laugh and talk about stupid things, with no hidden meanings or tests to pass. Meanwhile, back at home, a strange thing was happening. Virginia was happy. For the first month or so, she seemed to think my new routine was a victory for her. She thought her lectures had finally worked. I overheard her on the phone with one of her friends. She was saying that I had finally started doing the work on my own, that I was channeling my masculine energy into productive, non-demanding outlets. She said I had finally understood the importance of her boundaries. In her mind, she had successfully trained me. I was no longer the needy, problematic husband. I was now the quiet, self-sufficient roommate she'd always wanted. She was enjoying her victory. She had all the power. The bed was hers. The dynamic was entirely on her terms. She didn't realize that I wasn't just respecting her boundaries. I was building my own. And she didn't realize that the power she held was entirely dependent on me wanting something from her. The moment I stopped wanting, her power vanished into thin air. But she hadn't figured that out yet. About 2 months into my new life, the first cracks started to show in her triumphant narrative. I came home from work one evening. I'd had a great day. Closed a big account. I was feeling good. I was humming a tune from a song I was learning on the guitar. Virginia was on the couch reading. She watched me as I walked through the living room. I noticed she was wearing something a little nicer than her usual lounge clothes. Her hair was done. I just smiled, said, "Hey," and went to the kitchen to make myself a protein shake. A few minutes later, she came into the kitchen. She leaned against the counter, watching me. "You seem to be in a good mood," she said. "Yep." Good day at work, I replied, focusing on my shaker bottle. There was a pause. It was the kind of pause where I was once expected to ask her about her day, to turn the focus back on her. I didn't. I just drank my shake. I could feel her staring at me. I could feel the confusion radiating off her. I finished my drink, rinsed the bottle, and said, "Well, I'm going to go practice guitar for a bit." As I turned to leave, I saw her face. It was a mix of confusion and something else, annoyance. For the first time in a long time, she was the one left wanting something from the conversation. It was a small thing, but I felt a flicker of something. That little flicker of confusion on Virginia's face became a slow burn over the next few weeks. It was like she was a scientist whose experiment was suddenly yielding impossible results. She had a hypothesis. If she withheld affection and applied ideological pressure, her husband would become compliant and eager to please. For a year, the data supported her hypothesis. Now, the experiment was broken, and she was trying to figure out why. Her next move was to test the variables. She started dressing up more around the house. Not for going out, just for a Tuesday evening. Nice dresses, makeup, the works. The old me would have fallen over himself with compliments. I would have seen it as a sign, an invitation. The new me would walk in, say, "You look nice," and then go about my business. I acknowledged it. I wasn't being rude, but I didn't treat it like the celestial event she expected it to be. I was giving her the same energy she gave my promotion. That's nice. The lack of fawning adoration was clearly frustrating for her. She'd stand in a doorway, expecting me to stop and stare. I'd just walk around her. She'd ask my opinion on a new outfit, and I'd give an honest, brief answer. "The blue one looks good." Then I'd go back to reading my book. She was presenting the prize, but I was no longer interested in the competition. When that didn't work, she moved on to Tactic B, the jealousy gambit. This was a classic from her playbook, one she'd used subtly in the past. It started with casual mentions of a new guy at her work. "He's really brilliant," she'd say over dinner, "and so emotionally intelligent. It's refreshing." The old me would have felt a prickle of insecurity. I would have asked questions, trying to gauge the threat. The new me just nodded. It's always good to have smart people on your team. A few days later, she upped the ante. "He brought me a coffee this morning. He remembered exactly how I like it. So thoughtful." I just said, "That was nice of him." Her frustration was becoming more and more visible. She was trying to get a reaction, any reaction. The culmination of this strategy was a Friday night. I was on the couch, practicing some chords on my guitar. She came in and announced she was going out for drinks with her work team. She made a point of telling me this new guy would be there. She put on her favorite black dress, the one I used to love. She spent an hour on her hair and makeup. She looked stunning, and she knew it. She came to say goodbye, clearly expecting me to be sullen or worried. I just looked up from my guitar, smiled, and said, "Okay, have a great time. Don't do anything I wouldn't do." I said it with a completely genuine, cheerful tone. And I meant it. Her face fell. For a split second, I saw pure, unfiltered rage. She had spent all that effort, not to have fun with her friends, but to provoke a reaction from me. And it had completely, utterly failed. She left without another word, slamming the door just a little too hard. I went back to my guitar. I finally nailed the solo to a song I'd been working on. It was a good night. She came home late, and I was already asleep. The next morning, there was a definite chill in the air. It was around this time she switched to Tactic C, the concerned wife. If she couldn't provoke me, she would pathologize me. My newfound independence had to be a symptom of a problem. She started treating me like I was sick. "Ryan, are you feeling okay? You seem distant." "I feel great, Virginia. Never better. It's just, you're so quiet. You spend so much time at the gym or with that guitar. Are you avoiding me? Are you depressed?" This was her attempt to frame my self-improvement as a mental health crisis. She was trying to get me to admit I was broken, so she could be the one to fix me again. "Nope, not depressed. Actually, the gym has been great for my mental health. You should try it sometime." Every attempt she made to diagnose me, I calmly deflected. I wasn't playing defense. I was just living my truth. I felt good. Her version of reality, where I was a sad, withdrawn man, simply wasn't real. The complete failure of her strategies sent her into a new phase. The the smug sense of victory, was long gone. Now, it was being replaced by a low-grade, simmering panic. The power dynamic had not just leveled out, it was rapidly inverting. I was the one who was happy, fulfilled, and self-contained. She was the one who was anxious, reactive, and constantly seeking validation. She started doing things the old me would have begged for. She'd suggest we watch a movie that she knew I liked. She'd cook my favorite meal, unprompted. She'd ask me about my day, and when I gave a brief answer, she'd press for more details. But it all felt calculated. It was just another form of manipulation. She wasn't doing these things because she cared about me. She was doing them because she wanted to see if the old button still worked. She was trying to get a hit of that old power, that feeling of me being grateful and indebted to her. I remained polite and appreciative. "Oh, thank you, that was thoughtful." But I didn't give her the emotional reaction she was craving. I didn't soften, the wall remained. Her desperation was becoming pitiable. I remember walking into the living room, and she was listening to a song from early in our relationship. She looked at me with these big, hopeful eyes, clearly expecting me to have some kind of sentimental reaction. I just smiled and said, "Haven't heard that one in a while," and kept walking. The silence I left behind was heavier than any argument we ever had. Then came the first time she tried to directly initiate physical contact in months. It was a Thursday night. I was reading in bed. She came out of the bathroom wearing some silky thing I hadn't seen in years. She got into bed and moved closer to me than she had in what felt like a lifetime. She put her hand on my chest. My entire body tensed up, not with excitement, but with a primal sense of recoil. It felt like a trap. It felt deeply, profoundly insincere. My mind flashed back to all the rejections, all the lectures, all the nights I lay awake feeling worthless. This wasn't affection. This was a panicked queen trying to get a rebellious subject back in line. I gently took her hand off my chest. I looked at her, not with anger, but with a kind of sad finality. "Virginia, I'm really tired," I said, my voice soft. "It was a long day. I just want to sleep." I used her own words, her own excuses, but I delivered them without the condescending tone she always used. I just stated it as a fact. Her eyes widened. She looked like I had slapped her. The shock on her face was absolute. The idea that I could say no to her was so foreign, it was like I had started speaking another language. She pulled back to her side of the bed as if my side was electrified. She didn't say a word. She just lay there, rigid, staring at the ceiling. I turned off the light, turned over, and went to sleep. That was the moment she knew. She knew she had lost. All of it. The game, the power, the control. It was like watching a chess player who had sacrificed all her pieces for a checkmate, only to realize her opponent had taken his king off the board and walked away. Her entire strategy had been based on one single, flawed assumption, that I would always want what she was selling. The weeks after that night were tense. She swung between moods. Sometimes she was cold and silent, trying to punish me with her disapproval. It didn't work. I was immune to her disapproval now. Other times she was overly nice, almost servile, trying to win me back with kindness. That didn't work either. I saw it for the manipulation it was. I just kept on my path. Gym, work, guitar, friends. My life was getting better every single day. I was losing weight, gaining muscle. My confidence was at an all-time high. People at work were treating me with a new level of respect. My friends and I were planning a weekend camping trip. I was building a life that I was proud of, a life that didn't revolve around begging for scraps of affection from my wife. My happiness was the ultimate proof of her failure. The happier I became, the more miserable she got. I think she finally realized that her behavior hadn't just put our intimacy on hold. It had killed it. It had poisoned the well. You can't use something as a weapon for a year and then expect it to feel like a gift. She had taught me, through painful repetition, that intimacy with her was a source of anxiety, humiliation, and shame. My brain was now hardwired to see her advances as a threat, a test, a prelude to another lecture. The desire was gone. It had been replaced by a conditioned sense of self-preservation. The final confrontation happened on a Saturday. I had spent the morning at the gym with Jared, then came home to work on my guitar for a bit. I was in the middle of learning a complex piece, totally absorbed. I didn't realize that Virginia had been preparing for war. When I finally came out of my study, the entire atmosphere of the house had changed. There were candles lit everywhere. The lights were dim. Soft music was playing. The dining table was set for a fancy dinner. She'd clearly ordered from that expensive place we went to for anniversaries. Virginia was standing in the kitchen, holding a bottle of wine. She was wearing the black dress. It was a full-scale assault, a desperate last-ditch attempt to rewind time. "I thought we could have a nice night," she said, her voice a little shaky. "Just the two of us, like old times." "It looks lovely, Virginia," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "But I actually just ate a post-workout meal. I'm stuffed. And I was planning on meeting up with Mark and the guys to watch the game in an hour." The truth was, I wasn't that hungry, and I only half planned to go out. But the sight of this elaborate trap sent my defenses into overdrive. I was not going to walk into that ambush. That was it. That was the final straw for her. Her face crumpled. The carefully constructed mask of the seductive wife shattered into a million pieces. "The game?" she repeated, her voice a whisper. "You'd rather go watch the game with your friends than spend an evening with your wife?" "It's not about that," I started to say, but she cut me off. "Then what is it about, Ryan?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "What is wrong with you? I'm trying here. I'm putting in the effort. I set all this up for you." She was gesturing wildly around the candlelit room. "I appreciate the effort, I really do," I said calmly. "No, you don't." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "You don't appreciate anything I do. You just come and go from this house like I'm not even here. Do you have any idea how that feels?" The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. "What do you want from me?" she sobbed. "Why don't you want me anymore? Am I not pretty enough for you now that you're in shape? Did you meet someone at the gym?" The accusations were pathetic. She was just throwing things at the wall, trying to find a reason for my behavior that fit her narrative, a reason that wasn't her own fault. I just stood there and let her vent. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. When she finally ran out of steam, her shoulders slumped in defeat, she asked the question that was really at the heart of it all. "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you punishing me?" I looked her straight in the eye. For the first time, I think she saw the man I had become, not the project she had tried to create. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "I'm not punishing you, Virginia." I took a breath. "I'm just not playing anymore." She stared at me, uncomprehending. "For over a year," I continued, "you treated intimacy like a performance bonus. It was something I had to earn. I had to complete a checklist of chores and emotional tasks, and if I did everything perfectly, I might be rewarded. You turned my home into a workplace, and you were the boss." Her mouth opened to protest, but no sound came out. She knew it was true. "I tried, Virginia. I really did. I read your articles, I did the work, I jumped through every hoop you set up for me. But it was never enough, because the point wasn't for me to succeed. The point was for you to have the power." I walked over to the dining table and picked up one of the fancy napkins she'd laid out. I looked at it, then back at her. "So I quit. I stopped working for you. I started working for me." Tears were silently rolling down her cheeks. "You wanted me to respect your boundaries. You wanted me to stop asking. You wanted me to stop wanting," I said. "You got exactly what you wanted. You won." I let that sink in. The terrible, hollow victory she had achieved. She had won the battle, and in doing so, had completely lost the war. She had fought so hard for control over something that was now worthless to me. She just stood there, speechless, a broken figure surrounded by the ridiculous, tragic props of her failed regime. I felt a moment of pity for her, but it was fleeting. It was replaced by a profound sense of peace, the peace of finally being free. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. "I'm going to go for a drive," I said softly. "I need some air." I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. I walked out, leaving her alone in the flickering candlelight with the ghost of our marriage. As I closed the door behind me, I could hear the sound of her finally letting out a gut-wrenching sob. The sound of a queen realizing she was ruling an empty kingdom. I didn't know where our marriage would go from there, if it would end in divorce or some other kind of arrangement. But as I got in my car and drove off into the night, I knew one thing for sure. I was never going back to being that guy. I was never going to beg for respect in my own home again. I had stopped playing her game. And I had finally started living my own.